Hey there, everyone. I'm meteorologist Cassie Nall, and this is your 10 Weather Impact Recap for the week. Let's start with a look at some of the top weather stories from around the country. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, has announced that we are officially in an El Nino. This is the name given to the warm phase of the El Nino Southern Oscillation, or the warming and cooling of the equatorial Pacific waters. Haley Time with the National Weather Service has a more in-depth explanation about this global weather pattern.
El Nino is here, and it could be one for the history books. You may have recently heard the term Super El Nino to describe its intensity, but that's not the term NOAA uses. Instead, NOAA forecasters categorize El Nino or La Nina events as weak, moderate, strong, or very strong. We determine its strength using the Relative Ocean Nino Index. This measures sea surface temperature anomalies in the Nino 3.4 region of the tropical Pacific, taking into account the average tropical ocean temperatures. In other words, the strength of an El Nino or La Nina event depends on how far above or below normal the sea surface temperatures are in this region, relative to the rest of the tropics. This current El Nino has a 63% chance of reaching the very strong threshold sometime this winter. If that happens, it could be one of the biggest El Nino events in NOAA's historical record. El Nino is not a storm, a hurricane, or a single weather system. It does, however, change the atmospheric flow around our planet, allowing weather systems to reoccur in certain areas. A stronger El Nino does not always mean bigger weather impacts, but stronger events can increase the odds that certain impacts could occur. Not all El Ninos are the same, so if you're curious how this El Nino could impact seasonal temperature and precipitation across the U.S., be sure to check out the National Weather Service's seasonal forecast, and you can always see your day-to-day weather by going to weather.gov.
El Nino tends to be strongest during the winter months, and its global impacts are typically most significant in the winter and early spring seasons. During a typical El Nino, the jet stream over the North Pacific Ocean tends to shift southward, bringing the storm track down over the southern tier of the U.S. The southward shift in the storm track can also lead to drier conditions over the northern Rockies, the Ohio, and sometimes the Tennessee valleys. We'll talk more about the potential impacts to our winter weather forecast when we get there in a couple months. In rural Virginia, ponds and rivers are a lifeline for local firefighters. 70% of fire departments in the state are volunteer run, and most rely on those natural water sources. Rural departments don't have the fire hydrants the suburban areas do, so crews may have to scout for water or even ask landowners for permission to draft from their ponds. And with the worsening drought conditions, low water levels are becoming a problem.
Just things to watch as this drought continues for a long time, and if it continues, who knows what July is going to be like.
That battalion chief says that finding water during a drought takes more time, more effort, more planning, and a lot of equipment. In western New York, Genesee County has the most acreage dedicated to farming than any other county in the state. And that county also leads the state in solar projects. Members of nearby communities are concerned that having so much land dedicated to solar projects will eventually hurt the local economy. Brett Davidson shares the story.
We can't plant anything, it's too wet.
Christian Junker is a third-generation farmer who operates CY Farms in Genesee County. With 7,500 acres, he grows food crops, feed, and even turf grass. And he's had years where it was a struggle.
There's good years and there's tougher years. You know, we go through different commodity markets, energy markets, labor markets.
To help weather the tougher years, he agreed a few years ago to lease about 200 acres of his land to solar developers.
Farming's hard, and this, you know, it is a stable stream of income.
Junker isn't alone. 30 other farmers or landowners in Oakfield and Elba have collectively leased more than 4,600 acres for the Cider Solar Project. Construction is now underway. All large-scale solar projects are approved by the State Office of Renewable Energy Siting, created to streamline the process.
It really was out of recognition that utility-scale projects that are major, generation resources should go through a very detailed and extensive state-level process and also have a lot of protections built into that process.
It's because these giant power lines that feed right from Niagara Falls.
But Genesee County Manager Matt Lander says developers, with the approval of the state, have gone too far here.
This is beautiful farmland, and they came out here with big paychecks, and they've basically laid siege onto our little county here in Genesee County.
It's hard to fault the farmers who can lease their land to energy companies for as much as $2,000 an acre.
People think, oh, farmland is being lost, but it's actually supporting the farmers by helping them keep a bottom line going.
Marguerite Wells is executive director at the Alliance for Clean Energy New York. She says solar energy is critical to meeting the state's rapidly growing power needs while reducing reliance on oil and gas.
The challenge in New York is where else could you possibly put any solar panels?
According to a 2024 report by the State Controller's Office, Genesee County dedicates 56% of its land to agriculture, the highest in New York. Lander says the state has invested millions of dollars in dairy processing companies in Genesee County, and more solar means less acreage to support those agribusinesses.
You need to have cows and milk to be able to feed these companies, and our local farmers want to take advantage of this opportunity, but they're being priced out by not being able to acquire the land or use the land they need to be able to make a living and support these businesses.
But Wells says a lot of this comes down to private property rights.
The folks who own the land and pay the taxes really need a way to keep paying the taxes. And if they want to put houses, they can sell it off as housing lots. They could be growing hogs out there, or they could put solar panels in.
But even this farmer, who is leasing land to solar developers, believes it's gone too far. Christian Junker says he now regrets his decision.
We never would have imagined the scale that we saw here in the county, and we really think it's flipped the balance of the local economy here in terms of there's too many acres that have been converted.
In Minnesota, strong winds blew a train off the tracks as severe weather moved through the Midwest last week. The line of storms packed hurricane-force winds, and officials estimated that gusts over 80 miles per hour caused the train to derail. Roughly 20 cars were knocked off the tracks, but thankfully there were no injuries reported. In Texas, one woman says she was deeply impacted by the deadly flooding that took place on Independence Day last year. But it wasn't just the loss of life in her community, it was also the loss of more than 50 trees on her property. As Brian Bose found out, she's making sure that the legacy of those trees lives on.
Marcy Dunn absolutely loved wood and trees growing up, which made the floods of July 4th last year so heartbreaking, as she lost over 50 trees on her property. But she's found a way to turn that into a positive by giving back. And it starts right here in her workshop.
These are all...
To call Marcy Dunn eccentric might be the
I have a new watch.
Understatement of the year.
There's my raccoon. And when you look on the other side, his butt is on the other side. Vice?
And honestly,
Vice?
We hit it off from the very beginning.
We made it Spice Girls.
From the many things she collects.
The guy that made this had a photograph of me.
To the story she tells.
I had gray hair and I had glasses.
You still have gray hair and glasses.
Yes, but
And the secrets she keeps.
I just finished this, and it's going to be given to somebody that I can't tell you because they're pretty famous. So this is...
Judge Judy.
No, just famous in career.
Safe to say, I had mad platonic love for Marcy, who feels the same way about this piece of Center Point, Texas, which she's called home for the past 30 years.
This is our peninsula. We called it our private cove.
This has always been a place where she could be herself.
Private door.
Where creativity...
And then there's one penny for a glint.
...ruled the day.
You made this treehouse?
Yes. The rule was no trees can be cut.
But the deadly floods of July 2025 changed all that.
That just got ripped off.
It changed the landscape. And it changed Marcy.
I was down here every single day with all the people. And we found 6 deceased people within this area.
That trauma left her unsure of what to do.
I did not lose any people that I knew, but I really had a hard time getting over this.
She found the answer along the riverbank, where she lost 58 trees, but was determined to salvage what was left.
No cut. That's what you put up so FEMA wouldn't cut it down.
Oh, nobody would cut it down.
She managed to pull many of them up to the house, cut them into usable pieces.
That's called a what?
Crotch piece.
I have no idea why.
Well, don't go there.
And then she got to work, shaping the wood into bowls. Big, little, round, square. Some for her, but most for flood relief.
Is there a bowl in here that was one of your trees?
No, because I've sold them. I've sold them.
A sweet smile, a quirky personality,
I didn't show you. Hold on.
and a heart of gold.
I didn't think 2 seconds about it. I saw an opportunity that I could help fix.
This is Marcy Dunn, and these were her trees.
It's gotten me past some of my deep heartbreak from a year ago. It's my way of celebrating and paying credence to the folks that died.
Back here in the Southeast, experts say that proposed budget cuts from the Trump administration could be bad news for Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The proposed federal budget includes a 13% cut to the Department of the Interior, amounting to a loss of more than $2 billion. And America's most visited national park could feel the impact. Ellis Rolls spoke to the park supporters about the drop in funding amid the rise in visitors.
Tourists are packing the trails, overlooks, and campgrounds at the Great Smoky Mountains National Park this summer, but advocates say the system caring for the park is under pressure.
The number of parks are up, visitors are up, budgets are down, and number of employees are down, and morale is down, of course.
Phil Francis spent years helping oversee the Smokies and says uncertainty around funding can ripple through parks big and small. He estimates the Smokies has lost 35 to 40% of its entire staff in the last few years.
If the staffs are cut, it's pretty hard to keep things clean. Garbage disposal, accidents that occur, interactions between people and wild animals.
And in America's most visited national park, demand is only growing. Last year, the Great Smoky Mountains National Park welcomed more than 12 million visitors. Nationwide, park visitation has climbed, even as advocates say staffing has struggled to keep pace.
Not only are these staff that we see when we go to visitor centers in the iconic flat hat, but these are also staff that protect the resources within our national parks that are why we go and visit.
Olivia Porter works for the National Parks Conservation Association. She says without enough workers, everyday park operations can suffer, from trail maintenance to public safety.
Without adequate staffing in our national parks, there's not folks to maintain trails. When trees fall, rangers are the ones going out there and clearing the way so that you can continue on the hike that you want to have with your family.
And when staffing falls, communities surrounding parks can feel it too.
When parks have to close or if services are reduced, that's bad for business.
Fewer tourists in parks means fewer tourism dollars spent.
For every dollar that's spent in a national park, $15 are invested in communities that are adjacent to those national parks. We call them gateway communities.
As millions head to the Smokies this summer, advocates say the question now is whether people caring for America's parks will have the resources to keep up.
National parks are America's classrooms. It's one of our greatest investments and such a uniquely American thing. And so I think it's something to celebrate, and we can do that by funding parks.
Whitewater rafting in the Nolichucky River Gorge has long been a staple in East Tennessee and western North Carolina, but catastrophic flooding from Hurricane Helene changed the landscape and shut down all recreation almost 2 years ago. Kayla Pern shares the comeback in the works for companies who depend on the river for their livelihood.
The reopening of the upstream portion of the Nolichucky is still more than a week away, but you can see the excitement on people's faces at just the thought of getting back on this water. Rafting companies have been able to launch in the lower portion of the Nolichucky, but starting June 12th, they'll be able to return upstream to the Nolichucky Gorge. And local business owners say it's unlike anything else.
Out here, we truly are in a wilderness area, and it's a remarkably remote, rugged, and scenic river corridor that has some really amazing rapids too.
The reopening comes as the U.S. Forest Service is expected to finish rebuilding the Poplar, North Carolina boat launch. These renderings show the expected result. It's required nearly 10,000 tons of rock and 11,000 cubic yards of fill material. The wait has had a major impact on businesses. Slayton Johnson opened Wahoo's just 5 months before Helene.
It's been a roller coaster. I've learned a lifetime of lessons in the last 2 years, but I think all I'm focused on now is the excitement of getting back to work.
Johnson and other rafters have spent this time helping with the recovery, but now they're ready to get back on the Nolichucky.
That's where I trained 27 years ago. That's where I became a river guide. It's where I became a trip leader. It's where I became a head boatman, and then a river manager, then an outpost manager, and eventually became a partner in a whitewater rafting company.
And they say Helene has not ruined the experience.
Helene moved a few things around and reorganized a few rocks in a way that we tend to like a little better now.
Rafting businesses recommend booking early if you want to get on the river this summer.
And we are currently experiencing our earliest sunrises of the year at 6:18 a.m. Our longest day of the year will happen on June 21st when the summer solstice takes place, giving Knoxville 14 hours and 36 minutes of daylight. Now, while daylight hours will start to slowly decrease after the solstice, our sunsets will still be getting later, reaching the latest time of 8:56 p.m. from June 24th through July 3rd. Now, the reason for the difference in timing between the earliest sunrises and the latest sunsets, the elliptical shape of the Earth's orbit around the sun. And speaking of Earth's position in relation to the sun, it also helps to give us seasons. Summer officially begins this Sunday on June 21st with the solstice. That's the moment that the sun's most direct rays reach the northernmost point on the Earth's surface, exposing the northern hemisphere to our longest daylight hours of the year. Now, from that point, as you heard moving forward, our daylight hours will start to decrease. Thank you so much for watching. And remember, you can get the latest forecast and watch our 24/7 live radar anytime with the WBIR app. You can download that app for free to watch on your TV.